ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו
The most famous words of this week's Torah portion are Shema Yisrael. The next most well-known words of this week's Torah portion are Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. The next most well-known words of this week's Torah portion are Achalta v'savata uve'erachta et Adonai Elohecha al haaretz hatova asher natan lach. Once you have eaten and are satisfied, then you should bless the eternal God who has given you this good land. The good land our Torah is referring to, of course, is Eretz Yisrael, over the ocean. And it does produce delicious food. But the food that we enjoy here at our Shabbat tables in Toronto comes from another good land. And this mitzvah to offer up Birkat HaMazon after we eat is a reminder to call attention to the land, to the good land, which gives good produce from a good God. So as we prepare for the prayers for healing, first we ask for healing of the land, healing for the people who live on this land, the many peoples who live on this land, and we acknowledge that there were indigenous Canadians living here for millennia long before we ever arrived. Jan Sherman is an Anishinaabe leader, a mother, a culture keeper, a storyteller, a drummer, and a spiritual guide. And she says this is why land acknowledgement is so important. Land acknowledgements are living entities formed by sacred breath that should be spoken from the heart and reflect humility, gratitude, respect, and responsibility toward place, fire, water, and air. They should speak of our honest, traditional, accurate recognition of our kinship with the land. If you are a guest on traditional lands that First Nations, Inuit, and Métis call home, for thousands of years now, your acknowledgement should demonstrate respect and gratitude towards these peoples for the way that they lived and continue to live in nature. And so we show respect for the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who can model for us how to live in nature. We may be far away from the good land that was assigned to us, but we, to the Jewish people, I should say, but we can show great gratitude for this good land which is shared with us today. We also call into mind those friends and family of our congregation who are in need of healing. We ask that God will grant a refuah shlema to Johanna Falk, Chana Bagitol, Sarah Leah bat Moshe Meir v'Naomi, Miriam bat Binyamin v'Sarah Leah, Joel Sears, Sima bat Chaim v'Chaya Sarah, Gitol Yaakova bat Shmuel v'Sarah, Moshe Gershon ben Baruch Shalom Chaim v'Rachel Leah, Ari Solomon Gagol, Akiva ben Lina, and Chanoch ben Pinchas v'Esther. Are there any other names to be called into our prayers for healing tonight? Steinberger.
Mi she'perah מקור הברכה לאבותינו. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. Misheberach avotenu מקור הברכה לאמותינו. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen.
It is also our pleasure to welcome back to Holy Blossom Temple Toby, Molly, Henriette, and Dov Helfman. I know they're checking out all their old hiding places, right? Scattered throughout the campus. And they're here to visit with family and friends. They're here because Gemma has a summer camp that she still runs in Toronto. And lucky for us, they're also here to bring a little Torah. Rabbi Jordan Helfman really needs no introduction. He served our congregation well for 8.5 years as assistant rabbi and associate rabbi, and he has gone since December to lead a congregation called Swezers, which is probably the only congregation that has a funnier name than Holy Blossom Temple. Swezers stands for Southwest Essex and Settlement Reform Synagogue, and as you'll hear, this was the first synagogue which our own Rabbi Marmer served. So thank you, Rabbi Helfman, for taking a break from vacation to come back to the Bima and teach us.
First, I want to thank Rabbi Splansky for the invitation to address you all this evening and to be back in these really special spaces which make up Holy Blossom Temple. And as Rabbi Splansky alluded to, I'm going to be mentioning and teaching a bit from the words of Rabbi Dov Marmer, and his office was just over there, if you'll remember as well. Many of you, I'm sure, will have participated in Rabbi Marmer's funeral online and heard Rabbi Splansky's eloquent and moving tribute to her teacher and to a teacher that inspired by his presence as well as by his absence. And as Rabbi Splansky mentioned, I'm now serving the congregation he called the bride of his youth, the first of his communities, located to the east of the East End of London. And my reflections of that congregation match his own. It's a lovely place with some of the most welcoming and caring people you can find outside of Toronto. People seeking to walk through life in England together as Jews. And that is a bit of what I want to unpack with you this evening. What does it mean when I say that here in Toronto, we have one of the most lovely and inspiring Jewish communities, and in England there's a caring group of people navigating life as Jews? So as I walked into the synagogue this evening, next to a beautiful tribute to Rabbi Marmer were free copies And I believe that they're on very short supply. No, I believe we have there's boxes in the building. So please don't hesitate to walk out with your very own copy of On Being a Jew, a Reform Perspective by Rabbi Marmer. And you will find on page 102 an article entitled London to Toronto, Personal Impressions. And in his article, he mentions one of the points of difference between the two cities. He says that in London, there are more kosher butchers per capita than there are here. But in Toronto, there are Jewish bookshops. Now, if you just think about this neighborhood, you can get a real feel for that difference, right? If you walk just north to Eglinton, you will find Nortowns, which is kosher style. Kosher style, right? Which is great. It's what most people in our community want in their Jewish butcher. And further down that way, right, there is Israel's. There is a Jewish bookstore right up the road. It's gone? It's even further up the road that way now. Things change in 6 months. In the pandemic, it's true. It's true. But on my local high street in Barkingside, there is no Jewish bookstore. And I would add no demand for one beyond the occasional bar mitzvah card. Right? I'll find many posts in the Jewish Facebook groups, which I'll mention in a minute, of people looking for a good bar mitzvah card, instead finding ones that either the Hebrew's not right, or they have crosses, or all kinds of things that Israel's just would not sell and would know not to sell, as it is. But next to the card shop, there is a kosher-style bakery, Peppermin's, which sells great challah, by the way, but not with the streusel. That's only in Toronto that you get that. And just past it, of course, is the Kosher Butcher, which is a center of community which people travel to from across the area in order to make sure they have food for their Shabbat tables, because I would say 30, 40, 50, 60% of my congregation only eats kosher meat, as you would expect in a Reform community in England. This obsession with ethnic identity through legislation, through legalistic ritual, infuses every aspect of Jewish communal life in England. You may know that the Facebook groups in Toronto are divided between the establishment, Everything Jewish Toronto, and the alternative, Jewish Toronto Actively Anti-Racist. In my local area, the groups are labeled the alternative, Jewish Essex for All, and the establishment, Essex K, standing, of course, for Essex Kosher. And if you dare to post a non-hechsher product on Essex K, you'll be hearing about it. Kind of like the recent electric headline in the Jewish Chronicle, one of the main communal newspapers. Animals should be stunned before shechita, report to Reform rabbis says. Animals should be stunned before shechita, right? Before they are shechted, before the animals turned into kosher meat, it should be stunned, says a report to Reform rabbis. In response, the Jewish News, the alternative paper, published the measured headline, "Stunningly Reckless. Shechita UK attacks ignorant Reform report on kosher meat." Now, this is, of course, a tempest in a teacup. It's a headline about a report submitted to the Reform Rabbinic Group in England. Could you imagine the newspaper headlines here if the Reform Rabbinic Group tackled pre-stunning before kosher slaughter? There wouldn't be any, right? One of my conversion students recently spoke to work colleagues about the meaning of Shabbat that she'd learned in the class, and how for her family it meant becoming screen-free. And her colleagues looked at her quizzically and said, "But do you even know what time Shabbat comes in?" Because, of course, that ritual element is a key part of Jewish identity and what it means to be a British Jew. In Toronto, here, you have an inspiring Jewish community, a community of individuals striving towards a deeper understanding of how Judaism infuses your modern lives. It is a commendable inner journey of learning and choosing Judaism again and again. While in the British Jewish community, you can feel the ethnic difference, the othering by the political establishment, the feeling of living in a place where you are valued but not quite us. To be a Jew in Toronto is a journey of bookshops. In England, it is a ritual framework of otherness, where the community comes together to embrace that otherness as empowering. Of course, these are generalizations, but it still sets up paradigms we can learn from. Rabbi Marmer introduced some more of that ethnic identity and ritual here. Shacharit, Mariv, creating ritual moments he passed on through his students, Rabbi Moskowitz, Rabbi Splansky. I will do my best to work in the UK. I'm not sure that I will ever get to having a bookshop near me. It is the Amazon age after all, and the demand for bookshops in general, as you can all tell by Israel's having to move locations, is no longer as popular. But maybe for book clubs and the thick social connections among the small groups of people choosing Jewishness again and again here. And I know that there is still work to be done to lean into the meaningful ritual that is part of Rabbi Marmer's legacy. The daily Shachri group here is larger than my Friday night services in London. That says something of his and his students' success and the special place that this community creates through creating community. But we could all do more. Every year an email comes out from the synagogue asking if you'd want to purchase a lulav and an etrog for yourself. In fact, Alana used to send the email, I know. This year, maybe you want to build a sukkah and have a place you can invite guests outdoors and distanced, if that's all you feel comfortable with. Maybe, now that most everyone is vaccinated, you're ready to invite guests to your Shabbat table. When is the last time you had guests to your Shabbat table? There's some guests here that I personally think you should consider inviting, not only the people to your right and your left, behind you, in front of you, but also, of course, your new rabbis, Sam and Eliza, inviting them. I hope you will invite them to dinner and then invite them again and again. Invite them to your cottages even. And if they're good guests, invite them back. Have some other congregants over. Invite them to your table. I know Avra regularly invites the rabbis to her Shabbat table, Aryeh, and there's many others here that I know just haven't thought of it and hopefully will begin to now. Festival tables as well. I know the homes that invited my family to their festival tables made us feel welcome here. Who will adopt your new rabbis? I know that it takes 2 to 3 years to feel like you belong to a place. And I know Holy Blossom can help it happen faster. We may have more kosher butchers and you bookstores, but the two need each other. The joy and the obligation, the ritual and the relational. Let's keep the cross-pollination happening, the friendships and the travel. Together we can build a stronger, more well-rounded Jewish world. A Jewish world proud and crafted in Rabbi Marmer's legacy. One that has a place for all of us around the Shabbat table, the festival table. And with that, I invite you to come and visit me in London to the Southwest Essex and Settlement Reform Synagogue, Swezzers, in Newbury Park on Oaks Lane. And I look forward to seeing you both in person and online. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, thank you.
It is good to be with you again, Rabbi Helfman. And if Rabbi Marmer's book included a chapter from London to Toronto, you've just started your book with a chapter from Toronto to London. Other way, London to Toronto. You know, yeah. And we hope that Gemma's camp will be successful every summer, so there'll always be good reason to come back to Holy Blossom Temple. We want to wish a mazel tov to Ali Randley and Josh Lewinberg, who will be joined at the chuppah this Sunday, and a mazel tov to Danielle and Nicholas Mancini on the naming of their twin daughters, Maya and Talia. We have an opportunity, in addition to the home hospitality for our new rabbis. There is also August 19th, that's already next Friday night, the final summer wine and cheese, pre-Kabbalat Shabbat wine and cheese, in honor of Rabbis Kay and McCarroll. So I hope you'll come and get to know them. There is on August 16th, the start of Tuesday games in the atrium to launch our Dorot program for the wisdom generation, we call them. And August 20th, there is an event entitled Havdalah Under the Stars, a special evening of LGBTQ plus inclusion and socializing. And as I mentioned, it is membership season, so please do think of family and friends and neighbors, colleagues who don't yet have a synagogue community to call home, and invite them into Holy Blossom Temple. It will be our pleasure to welcome them here. We turn to conclude our service, page 139. Please rise.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לצאת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
As we prepare for the Mourner's Kaddish, found on page 142, we invite the mourners among us to rise in your place if you are marking your site, or if you are remembering a loved one who has died within the year. We wish to acknowledge you and extend our condolences to you. Today we mark the yahrzeit of Sally Bader, Nina Boltzen, Henry Beinerman, Genendel Borden, Harvey Borden, Ada Berinsky, Robert Brody, Ivor Brody, Nathan Brodkin, Florence Brody, Hannah Brookstone, Sylvia Chris, Ann Conway, Purdy Crawford, Frank Dalcourt, Bella Eisendrucker, Marilyn Farber, Lillian Farber, Natalie Fine, Samuel Fine, Leo Frankel, Morris Gelman, Sandra Gertner, Greta Glicksman, Ronnie Goldstein, Charles Goodman, Joseph Gordon, Eve Gordon, Max Greenholtz, Rebecca Horwitz, Bert Eisman, Sarah Koppler, Martha Lebo, Pearl Levitt, Celia Levy, Abraham Levy, Henry Liss, Rachel Lowe, Clara Oberndorfer, Morris Offman, Irene Olsberg, Verilo, Annie Page, David Poulter, Albert Pasternak, Henry Ritchie, Larry Rosen, Billy Roth, Henry Rusak, Alexander Schaefer, Louis Shurkin, Ann Sherwin, Mikaline Slanetsky, Albert Sosno, Maxwell Stark, Kevin Winch, and Katun Yakub. We also remember those who died most recently and whose families are in the period of Shloshim. They are Clarence Blatt, Barbara Cass Mansfield, Richard Cole, Lily Cinnamon, Eva Dickstein, Eve Ennis, Dorothy Garfin Gilbert, Ned Goodman, Tanny Caden, Loren Credencer, Rabbi Dov Marmer, and Melville Olsberg. Are there any other names to be remembered this Shabbat? Zichronam livracha, may the memories of each one be for a blessing. We stand together with our mourners to support them as they grieve and to praise God's name with these words. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, ba'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyamechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'gala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei d'kudusha brichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn, and comfort to those among us who are bereaved. And together we say, Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. We rise for Kiddush, page 439. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat koresho b'achava v'ratzon hinchilanu zikaron lemahase v'reshit ki hu yom techila lemikra'ei kodesh zecher letzihar mitzrayim kivanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'chamim ve'shabar kodshecha me'achava u'veratzon hinchaletanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabat l'chaim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem
min haaretz. Amen. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, Shabbat Shalom. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shikach.